And welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Devine. He is a reparations activist in the state of New York. Welcome, Devine.
Oh man, it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad we could get together because I know you're a very busy person, but I really appreciate what you're doing in New York, and I definitely want to get into that tonight.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, just on that on that point of busy, it's if we don't, what I found out very, very quickly in this political reality, this political landscape of ours, if we don't do it for us, no one will. And so that's what I really try to spend most of my time doing when I'm not, doing what I got to do to pay the bills.
All right. So I know that you have been attending the meetings in New York for the Reparations Task Force in New York. So for those who are not aware, I know I've talked about the task force in California quite a bit, but there's also a Reparations Task Force in New York. And you, like I said, you've been attending some of those meetings. Can you tell everybody what that task force is about and what is the ultimate goal?
Great question. So, not only have we, myself and the organization, and actually multiple activists on the ground, not only have we been at every hearing, meeting, and it's only really been two, right? But we've been involved in the process since the very beginning. When they first introduced the version of the bill that had three organizations actually baked into the crust, giving them a virtual lock on making decisions for that task force, we as a community, we as the grassroots got together, had calls to action to bring that light to the Speaker of the House here and also the President of the State Senate to let them know that that was unethical, that was not supposed to be done. If we're going to have a true community task force, has to have actual community members and actual community-based organizations and not just the ones that or want. So we got that struck down. Then we have the one that's currently in place. And we also had a call to action on that to have the governor actually veto that bill, because the way it is currently written and constructed, it is a race-based bill. And based on what we've seen going on around the country, including the Fearless Fund, affirmative action, and now they're even challenging the quote unquote reparations program in Evanston, Illinois, because it's race-based. We wanted to get out ahead of the curve. We didn't want to fall subject to that. But unfortunately, even though we were the organization that was called in to teach and educate the New York State Legislature in 2023 about reparations at the caucus weekend, they still went against what we taught and what we educated them on, even bringing in activists from California as well as Dr. Shirley Weber. They still went ahead with what they have going on right now. And so our role in the task force currently is to push them in the right directions, because if we do not, unfortunately, all of the recommendations that will come out of this task force, even though there are people on it with good intentions, it will produce a race-based recommendations, and those won't be able to be implemented anyway.
I think it's so important that you said that, because this is what I've been trying to explain to people quite a bit on this show, is that reparations cannot be race-based. It has to be based on lineage. Number one, there's the 14th Amendment that could strike it down. The Supreme Court would be the ones to strike it down. And for those who are not aware, a lot of times you hear us use the term freedman. That is the term that is specified. And I believe it was Clarence Thomas who decided to use that term and said, by the way, people may not know this, but Clarence Thomas actually does feel that reparations are owed. So you probably wouldn't have thought that because he's conservative, but he was the one that used the term freedman because of that reason. Because again, if it is race-based, it will be, strike down. So thank you so much for explaining that to people. And I hope that they can get that turned around. Does it seem like it's going in that direction?
So in fact, it really does. I mean, and we always say, that these people are planning one thing, and then we have, whether you believe in God, we call them the ancestors here in New York. We say the ancestors make another plan. And what we had, the final call to action, no, not the final, but the latest one, I'll say that the most recent call to action we had was we got into spaces with some activists across the country because we are building a nationwide coalition of power. And so we got the activists around the country to send emails to the task force email, to the governor, to Speaker Carl Hastie, and to Senate President Andrea Stewart Cousins. And because the first meeting, what happened was, according to open committee rules and things of that nature and ethics that are far above my pay grade, but listening to people that are more educated than I am, they were supposed to pick both chair people, the vice chair and the actual chair, in the first meeting. But because Ron Daniels, who was an avid and staunch Pan-African, who had one of his organizations written into the original bill that I mentioned that we got struck down, they advocated to hold off on that vote because he wasn't there. And so that violated all type of rules, because the person that, one of the individuals on the task force that wanted that position was there, and she put her, raised her hand to be heard and to nominate and be nominated, but they still held off on the vote. So we sent emails in between the first and second. And we know that it had an effect, because in the second meeting, I was able to speak with various task force members, and they let us know that we were the ones, all the emails in that folder that they set up for the task force were predominantly us, letting them know, hey, we're watching you. And so because of that, Dr. Ron Daniels was in attendance for the second meeting, but also Dr. Deborah Jenkins, who had, like I said, stated her case in the first meeting, also was renominated to be the vice chair. And the way the vote went, there were only 7 of them. And so 3 voted for Dr. Ron Daniels, 3 voted for Dr. Deborah Jenkins, and the chair had to be the deciding vote. And all of us in attendance were like, oh man, it's going to be Dr. Daniels. And she shocked us and went with Dr. Jenkins. And Dr. Jenkins is someone that is about justice, is about getting reparations right. And she understands the constitutionality of it all, because she's been very entrenched in it. And so she is, we are assured that she will stand on lineage business and make sure that that constitutionality is felt and adhered to throughout the proceedings.
That is awesome. We have a reparations task force here in Boston too. So this is appearing in different cities across the country. It's not just in, the San Francisco area and California, guys, but that is the one that got the most attention and the most news. But one of the questions I have about New York in particular, let's say I live in New York and I'm American descendant of slavery, but my parents and my grandparents were born in North Carolina, but I live in New York. Would the reparations task force in New York apply to someone like me, or is it a rule that your parents or your grandparents have to have been born in New York, or does the enslavement have to have happened in New York in order for you to be a part of reparations in New York?
That's a great question. And so when the bills were first being introduced and our organization got with Assembly Member Nikki Lucas and introduced our bill, we had actually American Freedmen bill that was set up to be lineage specific, had set a budget for a Freedmen's Bureau, and also for us to be a line item in the budget every year. Like, we wanted to make sure we got out in front of this thing and set the stage correctly. And so they actually held our bill up to have the bill that's the version that we see now that the task force is created off of. So, they actually played politics with our bill. But with the way it's currently constructed, that reparation, I call it the Of African Descent Equity Bill, it does not specify whether someone has to be, born in New York, have been able to have been moved here for someone else, or especially since most of the American freedmen in New York City came here through the Great Migration, right? Like, my family, I'm from a multi-generational New York family, right? We've been here for multiple generations, but we are here by way of the Carolinas, specifically South Carolina and Georgia. And so our bill took that into account, because you cannot even begin to talk about reparations without taking into account all that our people went through and what it took to get us to New York. And so members on the task force, and to name drop specifically Lori Daniel Favors, is one of the task force members that is looking to shrink that scope down to having it be not only people that were born in New York, but also only those that had ancestors that was enslaved in New York. And so we are fighting and pushing back against that because that is just too limiting, and it doesn't make any sense, especially since you look at a state like what California did. Now, we know all the shenanigans that went on there, but if you're talking about just limited to people that were enslaved in California, technically that's no one, right? Technically that number is inconsequential. Or if we look at certain other states where maybe there were no huge plantations, but our people migrated there, they still deserve reparations or any remedial justice, whether it's on the federal level or on that state or local municipality level.
So just an FYI, because I get this question a lot, and I did look this up. There were slaves in California. It was after 18. Real quick, let me check. Just so people know this, because this question comes up a lot, where people saying why are people pursuing reparations in California?
Right.
So it says several thousand free and enslaved people of African ancestry were part of the California Gold Rush, 1848 through 1855. It says white colonists from the southern and eastern United States brought their systems of organized slavery to California. So they still do say, like, you guys can look this up yourself, but they still do say that California, there was some sort of slavery in California, but I just wanted to let people know that. But to your point about the Great Migration, this is very important, because a lot of us that you see that are like in the Northeast, I'm not talking about those of us that immigrated here, but those of us that are American descendant of slaves, like we did get here, most of us, through the Great Migration. Even if you look at, like, my family's from Baltimore, my grandparents are from the Carolinas. Right. So they came up here during the Great Migration, and that's how, so it's important that people do understand that we moved around. Like, all of us didn't stay in the South. Like, people moved to different states during that time, and then during other times. And then there's been some migration moving back to the South, right, because of the cost of living in the Northeast as well. So this is important for people to understand. Like, when people say, oh, well, it should be just the Southern states that pursue that. No, we have moved around.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I thank you for that tidbit on California. And I did not mean it in a way as which there was no level of enslavement or slaves weren't there, because they did have the Fugitive Slave Act that they were enforcing in California as well. I was just saying, like, when you compare a state like New York had plantation, but a state where there was that level of slavery, but no true plantations, versus, like you said, in the South, where they actually had the killing fields active. That doesn't mean those states shouldn't enact or shouldn't put through any type of remedial justice on the local level. And all of what you said and more, just to do a shameless plug, has been extensively broken down in the robust 1,000+ page report that came out of the California Task Force. So it denotes all that history and more.
That's right. And in particular with New York, and this is incredibly important. We'll point to New York City, for example, because that's where most people are in New York. One of the most expensive cities and states in the country. And there is an enormous wealth gap in New York, just like there's an enormous wealth gap here in Massachusetts as well. And this is something that I feel has never been addressed. There was a study that was done by Dr. Sandy Darity, and he talked about, like, the wealth gap here just in Boston. And it was reported that if you look at the wealth gap in Boston, a white family has a wealth of estimated $250,000, and a black family's wealth is $8.
$8, that's right.
Yeah. And it's just, that is where, like, 40 acres and a mule could have made a big difference there. But if you didn't have any, a home to pass down generations, or land, which land means a lot, you didn't have that to pass down, then you're already at a disadvantage. So I think a lot of people just may not realize that.
Yeah, and to that point, I know we're talking about New York, and we get back on track. I don't want to talk too much about California, but it was, I believe, the reason I'm bringing it up is because I believe it was an article done in one of the Los Angeles newspapers, and it pointed to and highlighted the fact that George Floyd's family had land stolen. And so one could draw that line from that particular incident in history, him being, a descendant of those that were formerly enslaved and emancipated in this country. Had that wealth and had that land been passed down, is he even at that store to be accused of trying to pass a counterfeit $20 bill, whether that those accounts are true or not? And so there are tons of those stories of our people that have faced the cost of not being able to pass down wealth and land and assets in the same way that every other demographic has. And so that reality has consequences, and we live those consequences out today.
That's right. And another thing I want to bring up, I want to pivot to what happened with the Freedmen Bank with Kamala Harris. And I discussed this on the show before. Yes. The Freedmen Bank, which was established just for freedmen, Kamala Harris, and this is a Kamala thing, not a Biden thing. Kamala Harris decided to add other groups to the Freedmen Bank. Now, there are other, projects for different groups in this country. She decided to open it up to like all minorities, and she added like Latino groups, et cetera, to the Freedmen Bank. It went from a bank that was for American descendants of slavery and she tried to all lives matter it basically is how I would say it. And there has been quite outrage. I covered that story, and that video really took off, which I was surprised by that, but I covered that story, and there's been a lot of outrage from people about what she did. And my question is there any way to get that reversed, to bring that back to the freedmen?
Right. So we saw that a number of us in the reparations movement, the reparations space, we saw when that happened, and that initial one that they live streamed. And then we, read the brief that the White House put out, I think at the time, and we got to work immediately. With, like I said, with this nationwide coalition that we're building, I can't take credit for it as far as us in New York. We were a part of it. They went behind the scenes. We started making phone calls to the White House, to this administration, to any contact that we had. And what that resulted in was actually a member of LEAP, who is a lead organization out there in California. They're a part of CJEC, the Coalition for Just and Equitable California. And LEAP is a Lineage Equity Advancement Project. They were able to get in contact with some of the, I guess, decision makers involved with the Treasury at the time. And that resulted in our brother Chad from LEAP being able to attend one of the forums. Then that was in October of 2023. Yeah. So it was October 25th of 2023. He was able to go there. He didn't get a chance to speak directly to Janet Yellen at the time, but he did get a chance to speak with some of the people in the room and other individuals that are over certain other branches of the Treasury, so to speak. So those that handle like equity and inclusion, and those that handle like, like I forgot the other one, but like kind of like for women inclusion, for lack of a better term. And he got a chance to get in contact with them. And based on those contacts he made in October, earlier this year in 2024, a contingency of us were able to go to DC, where we went to the Hill, we went through the halls of Congress, and we set up meetings with senators, as well as representatives from the Treasury, from the OMB, from some of our legacy organizations. And we had a day long of meetings on the campus of the White House, where we were able to express these concerns and let them know, hey, we understand, we appreciate you invoking this history that is American history, but there is no way that you can take this name and bastardize it and give it to everybody else, especially given the history that you are well aware of. What are we doing to make sure that these families and that lineage gets the remedial justice that is due to them? And so in those meetings, we were able to address them. And what we found out is this, and this is something that is, obviously it would pertain to Republicans, Green Party, and as well as the Democrats, but it's really a Democrat Party in the way in which they build their coalitions. This government and this administration has a language problem. Those were the exact words of Chad Brown in one of the meetings. But what we're coming to find out is that not only do they have a language problem, what they do is they create the language problem and then hide behind it as if they're just a victim of the language problem. And so what they do is they understand Freedmen, they understand the power of it. They are well aware of what Justice Thomas said in those comments for the affirmative action, but they still move with POC and underserved and things of that nature, because that is how they build the coalitions that they deem fit or necessary to achieve the goals that they have set. And it's not going to be, it's only going to be, the only way it changes if we get in these spaces like we're getting in there, letting them know, hey, no, this is what we need, this is what we want, and we will enact consequences politically if we do not get what we want. And so that is really where we're at with those conversations. And because of that, we were invited back to, they had a summer symposium in July at Shaw University in North Carolina. We were there at that, and able to advocate again on the ground, getting with some of the movers and shakers, letting them know, hey, we understand where you're at politically, but what we need you to know is that whether you like it or not, the Black American community is shifting, and either you're going to shift with us or you're going to get left behind, because the days of having your gatekeepers in place speaking for us and corralling us, those days are quickly coming to an end. And either you're going to be ahead of the curve or behind it, because like I told them, we're moving and you're going to move with us or you're going to get left behind.
This is what I was trying to tell people. You see a lot of the gatekeepers in the media speaking on behalf of the Black community. But when I talk to people on the ground, I do not see a lot of support for the Democratic Party from Black Americans like I used to. Most people told me like they're not going to vote at all, that they're done with all of this. And I think that people get a different impression because they see certain people that are the gatekeepers that are there on MSNBC, the Al Sharptons, the Roland Martins, like all of these people, the Angela Rye's, like these are the gatekeepers. And a lot of them are part of the Black Boule. And that's who they have in the Congressional Black Caucus. These are the people that they choose to put in front of the camera and say, this is what the Black community wants. When a lot of those people are wealthy, a lot of those people have access to resources that the majority of us do not have access to. It's just a reality of the situation. And this happens with other groups too, not just with Black people. I'm pretty sure some of you watching and you're probably like, hey, that happens with my people too. They put this person in the front and that's supposed to be speaking for everybody. But it happens, those are the people that have decided to go along with the status quo. And so those are the ones that they put in front to speak for everybody. Quick question, again, I have about New York. How can people find out about those meetings? Like, how is there a website or a schedule somewhere where people can follow to know when those meetings are going to happen?
So at this point, I would say, and this is not a perfect science because we're learning it at the same time as the community is learning it. We're trying to be as connected as we can. And use some of the sources that we can't cite right now to get the inside track of when those meetings going to happen so we can let people know. But I would say one of the best resources is to follow our Twitter page. That is at US Freedman PRJ. Again, at US Freedman PRJ. Because as soon as we get those dates and any information about that, we will post that immediately. Unfortunately, and this is something that we're finding, like you said, with the gatekeepers, and I definitely have a couple comments on that. But what they're doing is they are announcing these meetings at the last minute. They're making them in the most unattainable places for your everyday working Black American or anybody else that wants to go in there and advocate. Like they're having them on Tuesdays in the morning. People have to work, but the last two are actually in Albany. So you have to go up to Albany to go there. The good news, and I can announce this on the show tonight, is that the next meeting has already been scheduled for October 1st. So it's going to be October 1st. So this is the, I was, given the green light to be able to say that tonight. And right now, it's so new that we do not have a location, but we have confirmed that it won't be in Albany. So that's great. It's either going to be in New Rochelle or one of the 5 boroughs, but it's still going to be on Tuesday at 11:30 in the morning. So it's a little bit more attainable. And we, in the last meeting, those of us that were in the room in attendance, we were able to let them know, hey, you know, if you really want if you're about this business that you claim to be, there has to be some days in the evening. There has to be some weekend dates. You have to make this accessible to the people if you want the people here, because as you can see, there's no people here. You know, don't count us as the people. Like we're unicorns. Like we're gonna be here because we are here. This is our work. This is what we do as an organization and those that volunteer with us. But we want the everyday folks up there that can just make it. It doesn't make any sense. And so that's one of the things that we said. Dr. Deborah Jenkins echoed that sentiment. A couple of the other task force members did as well. So they are pushing to have that. And that's one of the reasons why it's going to be what they call downstate versus Albany, which is upstate. And so it's going to be downstate in October. But, you know, we're still working. We're still pushing them from the outside to have that be more accessible date-wise and time-wise. So that the people can come out and we can actually, you know, have a good showing, because and I'll say this last thing on this is what they've said is, unless they have a task force member that calls in virtually, then there will be no space like it was in California where you can log in virtually and give comments virtually. That's something that they're not looking to do. That might change, might be able to push them on that as they, you know, start to now move into using this budget to hire people and get orgs that can help them advertise the task force and work alongside them. But as of right now, they stated in the last meeting that there won't be an option where people can give their comments virtually every meeting. It just won't happen.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And Albany is quite a ways. I mean, it's a ways for me, and I'm further north. I'm in Massachusetts, and so I would be going west. But Albany's is a ways. I don't care if you're in New York City or if you're like in Massachusetts. Like that's a drive.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's a drive for, again, with the way in which the meetings are set up, we do get a chance to give our thoughts or our testimony at the end. But you're driving all that way or traveling all that way to sit with them to do their meeting, to talk for, you get 3 minutes at the end. So not everyone will see the value in that, and I could totally understand that.
That's right. All right, guys, that is follow you at US Friedman PRJ. That's at US Friedman PRJ. Thank you, Ross Mickens, for that on Twitter, so you can stay up to date about the Reparations Task Force in New York. Devine, thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you giving the platform. And I the last thing I'll say is I've been watching your show, and we have been undecided. We have, we don't, as an organization, we can't officially endorse anybody, but just based on the fact that for me personally, understanding that I cannot support any candidate that does not fully embrace reparations, and to hear Kamala's, or Kamala, whatever, how you pronounce it, give her comments at the NABJ today, and essentially saying, yeah, I don't support reparations. Let's just do these universal programs. And then based on what the gatekeeper Angela Rye did on the Breakfast Club, I'm definitely looking at the Green Party much more than I ever have. And it's making sense. And I know that's one of the things that you're a proponent of. And I just want to thank you personally for having that on, putting that content out there, and educating me on their platform.
All right. Thank you so much, Devine.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that was Devine. Again, he's a reparations activist. Definitely make sure you check out that address I sent you there for Twitter, the @ PR. Well, Eric has it here. Just a second. Oh, also, thank you. Devine's group's website is usfreedmanproject.org. Follow him there. And then also on Twitter, especially if you live in New York, at usfreedmanprj. Check that out. Awesome. I've been waiting to talk to Devine. He's a very busy person, so it was great to have him on.